So, hello, George. How are you? Good to see you.
How you doing, Dr. Bravo? It's not Tuesday, it's Friday, and we're in Houston, Texas at the PMI conference. We usually elevate great physicians, but today we have one of the greatest physicians that I've ever met in my entire life, Dr. Sue Kressly.
Sue, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time. I know you're busy with PMI. Wonderful lecture with Dr. Wania this morning. Very, very well received. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, and George, your laudatory comments, I'm going to have to keep living up to those.
I owe a lot to you. You saved our practice.
Well, thank you. No,
just for being compassionate.
You saved your practice. I just pointed out and probably empowered you with the right tools.
So many of us know the story, but not all of us, right? So this was like a critical, mission-critical moment. You lost your EMR.
Oh yeah, I remember. I was on vacation in Maine. I get a call from our former EHR CEO, because he was theoretically my friend. He wanted to tell me before I heard through the grapevine that they're going to sunset their product. So now, what do? And we're going to sunset it in a couple of months. I got to find an EHR really fast. So I wrote an email to Sue. It was a Saturday night, actually, asking her, what do you think? I had looked at Office Practicum in the past. I knew a little bit about it. And I had asked her, what do you think I should do? And her answer was, give me a call, let's talk. On a Saturday night. I chatted with her for about an hour and a half.
Wow.
Kept me from jumping off a ledge, guided me as to what to do, and then invited me out to Pennsylvania, to their office to see the operations. Sat a whole day with me. And then the rest is history.
So that's how you know who your friends are,
yes,
right?
Correct.
Yeah, when we answer the phone on a Saturday night and say whatever you need, that is correct. Yeah. That's how you find your friends.
So I owe Dr. Kressly a lot.
And that's the true meaning of relationships.
Yes.
Yeah. So we always ask all of our guests, why did you become a pediatrician?
You know, you spend your whole career answering that question when you apply to medical school and college and all of that. To me, it actually, I think, was a calling. I've spent the rest of my career sort of justifying my calling. I always wanted to be a pediatrician. I love to solve problems. If you want to play words with friends with me sometimes, I like to play games and solve, try to excel at things. I love people. But I love kid people better than adult people. Oh. They don't come with their own agenda. I appreciate their sense of humor, and I fill my own cup personally by giving and helping others. It's always been part of what drives me and what gives me personal satisfaction, is to make sure that I'm helping lift up others.
You do help a lot of people.
And don't you think it's wonderful, like sometimes the kids will embarrass the parents in the exam room. Like the other day a kid was asking me, because he was talking about some video game. I have no clue. And he's like, what, you don't have a son? I'm like, no. You don't have a wife? No. Well, are you looking to get married?
No, I've had kids say to me, you should never wear that dress again. It's really ugly and looks bad on you.
And the mothers are mortified.
Oh, please, I know.
And I'm cracking up. I'm like, you know what? I said to her, I ask him, like, when does he poop? When does he eat? When does he sleep? All kinds of personal questions. And he's just asking me the more innocuous questions possible. Sure, I'll answer them.
Absolutely.
That's the joy of the exam room, isn't it?
Yep.
So you had a wonderful, just wonderful lecture this morning. It was so well received. And you had one of our favorite persons, I think a future leader, if not already a leader in pediatrics, Kathleen Wania from Rochester. And you talked about compassion. Tell me the elevator pitch for why compassion is important in any business, but more so in the exam room.
So I think in medicine, we forget, number one, why we went into it, to help people. Number two, that we are not taskmasters. We are not widgets passing along, making a car or a product. It's about having relationships with people across their journey towards better health. And if you don't treat other people so that they are seen, valued, heard, appreciated with compassion, two things happen. It becomes a transactional action. I'm here to get a prescription, and anybody could do that. And as physicians, we all know this. People are trying to replace us.
Right.
They can't replace our relationships. But I also think that in this culture of practice team unwellness, where everyone's feeling burdened and burned out, When we give and lead with compassion, we fill up our own cups, which gives us satisfaction. And so it's personally rewarding to have relationships that are compassionate to drive our care.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. On the way down here from DC, I sat next to a rabbi, and he teaches 8th graders. And he said to me, you know what the problem is? Everybody's looking for happiness inside themselves, and that destroys you. You're only happy when you're helping others. That's when people are happy.
So, that's very interesting, because long before it was sort of a thing, when I had depressed or a sort of despondent teens, I would, as part of their care plan, I would say, I want you to do something nice for other people at least once a day.
Yes. Have you heard about the gratitude letter?
Yes.
So I think George and I want to read you a letter, right? You have been a very elegant spokesperson for the importance of the American pediatrician for decades, not only at PMI, but the American Academy of Pediatrics, at the national level, at your own practice level. And you have shaped generations, and you continue to shape generations. And we owe you not only the rescue of his EMR, tragedy, but to see someone like you so outspoken but elegantly, kindly, and see how you could do it was always very impressive to me when I was listening to you. And so this is my letter of gratitude to you. Thank you for what you have done for the independent pediatrician in America, which, in combination with the scientists, pharma, the government, even the AAP sometimes, has prevented so many horrible diseases in the last 50 years. Thank you.
So I accept that thanks with a lot of gratitude on my part for the privilege and opportunity to do so. At this point in my career, I'm not seeing patients. I stopped seeing patients about 3 years ago. But I think that I can have equal impact that is personally gratifying by helping others to empower them. There's more than one way to take care of patients and be a pediatrician. And one that's very important to me is to empower pediatricians across the country to do the best that they can to have successful businesses so they have the opportunity to serve the kids and the families of their communities.
Correct.
Yes. And so you've picked out one of our favorite persons, Kathleen Wanya, to bring her into the leadership role within SOPM as a board member, I would say, or committee member.
So she's on our education committee, and we're talking to her about perhaps throwing her hat in the ring and becoming a part of the SOPM EC leadership. We have upcoming elections. Please, if you're interested in supporting her and our other candidates, it is our peers who will pick who they want to lead us at SOPM.
What I like about Dr. Wanya is, yes, she is young, but she listens. She listens, she absorbs everything you tell her. She never says, I know better, you don't know, you're an old guy. She listens.
And not only is she compassionate,
she absorbs.
She's very organized and deliberate. She's really done a vision, a mission, a value statement, and she thinks about how she's going to hire somebody, and she thinks about how she's going to behave. And I'm really happy that she's got great success.
Yeah, she's intentional. So let me tell you the story of how I got to know Kathleen. SOPM every year does a 360 survey where we ask all of our members to please give us feedback about what we're doing well, what we could do better, where we have opportunities, and if you're interested in sort of becoming more involved in helping SOPM. And so as I took over chair, I went and interviewed a bunch of pediatricians who had raised their hand in that survey. And I met Kathleen, and it took me about 6 minutes to realize that I had a gem in there. And we were talking, and I got to know her a little bit personally and her story. And stories are incredibly important, right?
Yep.
Not for us to share as colleagues, to share with our families. We're human, and I think that human connection helps. But she said to me, have you read the book Compassionomics? And I said, no, but I'm putting it on my list. Can I reach out to you after I've read it? And she said, absolutely. And she was telling me the story about her personal story about how she started to really relook at how care was being delivered in the practice that she belonged to at that time. And that's when I decided, okay, I got to talk about Compassionomics at PMI, and I have to invite Kathleen to the stage because she's the personal story of putting it into action, which is so compelling. But I was blown away this morning when I asked people to really, why did you go into medicine? Was it to be this transactional, give prescriptions, do check boxes of things you need to do for well visits, or what was it for? And the room lit up with positive energy. Right. People were happy, laughing, sharing stories. I had a hard time getting the room back under control. I think I could have just walked out of the room and it would have continued for a half an hour or more. But it really started people to say, wait a second, we're all here at PMI to talk about the business of how we can create better businesses and serve our patients better, but we have to go back to what drove us into this work and deal with the art of medicine, which is relationships.
Relationships. We have the best job in the world.
Oh, we do.
As a pediatrician.
Absolutely.
I mean, you guys must know, if you work in the town that you live in, if you go to Costco, how many people do you live? Hey, Doc, how you doing? I just know when somebody goes, hey, Doc, yeah, I do. I know it's a patient.
Yeah, and your kids go to the next aisle because they're like, please, Mom, do you know everyone in town?
All the time. All the time. You're like a rock star.
And it annoys them. I don't understand why it annoys them that people come up to you and say hello. It's like...
Well, my kid is more of an introvert. He's clearly not my genetics in that attribute, and so he doesn't like attention called to himself, so that's why he likes to fit. Plus, when he was a teenage boy getting in trouble, and I'd go home and go, dude, I know what went down at that party. Like, you gonna come clean or what? He's like, man, I can't get away with anything because everybody else in town brings their kids to me and tells me what's happening.
So from an institutional point of view, you have a very clear goal, what you want to do with the American Academy of Pediatrics. What is that goal?
I think there's probably two. One of which is I want to mentor new leaders. The face of the pediatrician is changing, and the organization that supports them needs to change in response to them. I think every child deserves access to a high-quality medical home, and every pediatrician who's trying to serve them deserves the right tools and resources and support to do that. But it's looking different in different geographies now more than ever. If you're the only pediatrician in 7 counties in Wisconsin, you are a totally different place than if you're on Long Island and there's a lot of competition and a lot of specialists and a lot of doc in the boxes and a lot of standalone urgent cares and remote telehealth. There's a lot of options. And so I think we have to figure out how we support pediatricians delivering care in all of those settings and make their voices be heard. So mentoring new leaders and bringing more viewpoints to the table to inform our work is important to me. I think that we've been very good at over the last decade of elevating the conversation at the American Academy of Pediatrics about payment issues. Payment's no longer a dirty word.
Right.
Sometimes I have to use the word resources when I'm talking to reluctant people, but that translates to the dollars to give good care.
Correct.
But I think that we also, one of my other goals is to try to move towards more kindness and grace in the way that we deal with each other, because just like our patients who are hurting and we can't fix everything for them, so are our colleagues. And I think that grace costs you nothing, right? To be kind costs you nothing, and that includes being kinder with ourselves.
Yes, and so you say the face of American pediatricians has changed. I'm going to push back. I'm going to say it changed 20 years ago. There are many, many practices in Northern Virginia where there are no males. That the front desk is female, the nursing staff is female, the pediatricians are female, the PAs are female, the nurse practitioners are female, to the point that when I cover their practices, I walk into a room, a little girl will say, and where's the doctor?
We were going from being manels with panels of men only to wannels, and now you guys are, although I am the odd woman out in this threesome, it is absolutely flipped. And if you look at residents, and there's different challenges, especially in women as you navigate through that part of your early part of career and training, there's a natural pull between also if you want to have a life where you have your own family and own children. It's sorry, gentlemen, it's different, right? Like you're not pregnant for 9 months and feeling sick and having to put an out of order sign on the bathroom in your office because you have post early pregnancy hyperemesis. I mean, like that. Yeah. No. The challenges are different.
So I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but I advise women not to become pediatricians until they're 30. I just go put that aside. Go get a boyfriend, go have the child, and then when you're 30, go back to medical school, because you'll never get back your 20s. And people are living into their 80s. If you do your medical school and residency at 30, you'll still practice 35 years, because the biology is undeniable.
Yeah,
I mean, I lost my young years, but I didn't have to get pregnant, But the pressure is tremendous on these young people, right? They come out with a lot of debt, not a lot of high-paying jobs, stressful jobs, starting a family, trying to start buying a house, trying to change the old medical school car into a decent car, and maybe start thinking about having kids. It's a big burden.
It is a big burden, but I'm so old. I came out of medical school, out of residency in 1989, $196,000 in debt.
Wow.
In 1989. Do you know why? Because the health education assistance loans floated with the treasury rate. Where were the treasury rates in the 80s? They were in the teens. Right. And everybody said, keep borrowing money, you'll be fine. When you make real money, the interest is tax deductible. And then they changed that tax provision. So I came out into practice being on call 2 weekends a month in the intensive care nursery in a local nursery. Right. For my practice 1 weekend a month, and I gave myself 1 weekend off, which is crazy. But the bottom line is I think there is no right answer for this journey. People are looking for answers, and it's a journey that everybody has to make decisions. And don't be afraid to change or pivot if this is not really working out for you. Figure out a way to take time off or work part-time or ask for help mostly, and try to envision different ways to get to what your personal goals are.
You know what I don't understand with like loan forgiveness? We are having a hard time finding doctors. We interviewed 2 physicians who grew up in our office. We saw them when they were in the nursery. They would have been the prime physician to bring them to the practice. They ended up going to one of those qualified health centers down the road from us to help get rid of their loans. We serve the same population of people, all Medicaid, Child Health Plus. Why can we not get loan forgiveness for these students?
So I think
it makes no sense.
It doesn't, and that's an area for advocacy that we should all figure out. There are some people who are creatively working around that.
I'd like to meet them.
Well, talk to Gail Schoenfeld. Her youngest emerging partner works in the hospitals, in the nursery, a couple of days a week just to meet that obligation, and then a couple so that she can get loan forgiveness and be. But I agree with you. The cost of medical education is forcing young pediatricians, especially since pediatricians are at the bottom of the barrel about getting paid. Just because the kids are shorter doesn't mean that our paycheck should be. I would argue that if we're going to invest in infrastructure, they should pay us twice as much to take care of kids as the end of life when you look at people who've only got, a decade to live. I mean, it's crazy, really. But I think there's a lot of room for advocacy, and you absolutely have it.
I have a new doctor that we're applying. There's this program in New York, doctors across New York. They have the same qualifications, Federal Qualified Health Center, not-for-profit, and then they have this other modality where if you serve an underserved population, which we do, we have about 60% Medicaid child, maybe on a one-to-one evaluation, maybe we can get it in. And if that works, it would be fantastic. But I doubt it.
So we definitely need to change the face of leadership in the academy. Not only, I don't mean that just more females, I mean more young people.
Yep.
It's time for and I make this argument about our federal government too. It's time for people in their 50s to be leading the country, not people in their 80s, because there's a point where you're not connecting with the young people anymore.
So I think there's a dichotomy. as you get older, you have more time because you feel less tied to other responsibilities, but you are not necessarily as connected and invested in what this looks like 20 years down the road. And so I think we have to get creative about how we partner and mentor and support young leaders and listen to them when they say, I'd like to do this, but I can't attend. So one of the good things that I think about the pandemic is we got better at hybrid and virtual connections. How do we get leaders involved where they don't have to physically fly to Chicago and be part of the meeting anymore? I think changes the equation a little bit. There is clearly a problem in that fills you up personally when you can hug your friends and really work together around a table and look people in the eye. But I think we have to start thinking outside the box about how we can get these people and remove their reasons for saying no to leadership. Part of it is, and I don't know how you get involved in leadership, but almost everyone I talk to, it's because someone who they looked up to tapped them on the shoulder and said, you have a skill that is worthwhile sharing. Everybody goes, who, me? Right? Like, who am I to do this, right? We all do. And the truth of the matter is we all have contributions to be made, and we have to figure out how we remove the barriers for saying yes.
And so you said something, I'm forgetting exactly the words you used, but I feel very strongly that the way the academy is currently run is a very closed system. I equate it to like the founding fathers and the what is it, electoral college, right? We can't trust the people to elect the president, so we're going to make it in a way that we can have trustworthy white men, finalize the vote so that we don't make a mistake. And the world doesn't function like that anymore. We have Survey Monkey polls that you could survey 67,000 physicians in 20 minutes and get their opinion. You might not agree with their opinion. Your policy statement might still be different from what I think. However, that inclusion is what young people want, and they want it in a modern way. They don't want to elect a chairman that goes to a meeting, then elects a board, that then does this, that does. That's not the way the world works anymore. We live in open societies where I don't have to go to the library to look for Oski's book anymore. I Google it, and I find his chapter, and I read it on my computer. So what are your thoughts about how we move the needle in that direction?
So I think it is changing a little bit more. I have seen younger, more diverse voices at the Academy being heard and listened to. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us who are existing leaders to really identify and push for getting those voices to the table, and to get rid of but we always have done it this way, procedural stuff. It's a professional organization that moves too slow. Now, I will say in defense of the Academy, during COVID, they were agile. They had to be. They were bringing out, getting consensus statements, putting people together on best practice guidance before you had to go through the whole sausage-making process of policy and everything else.
Okay.
And I had a conversation with some leaders recently where I think we felt too far backwards to saying, oh, well, we don't need that right now. No, that is the wave of the future. We have to figure out how you ingrain that continuous voice and showing member value to everybody who's a member. And just like we talked about compassion in our practices and letting patients be seen, heard, and valued, we have to make sure that pediatricians feel seen, heard, and valued in our professional organizations, or we're going to become obsolete, and it ultimately hurts us and hurts kids.
See, that's why I love Sue Kressly.
she's the best.
I stick my foot in my mouth every time. I mean, if you talk to Susan Sirota, I stuck my foot in my mouth several times last night. Okay, but you say things so nicely and eloquently. It's basically, it needs to be more open. People need to participate without having to run for office within the academy, and they need to feel like they're heard and that their interest somehow, some way, is being championed.
Well, and I think, so I will just say that I think there are a lot of people in leadership of a lot of professional organizations that are not nimble, that are conflict averse, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't want to make a mistake, I don't want to step too far out of here, Well, I think conflict is an opportunity to see things you wouldn't otherwise see, and to help an organization move forward and change and grow. To me, conflict is personal growth. So I invite all of the people who don't agree with me to the table because I'm going to learn something from you. We will probably figure out where we are on the same team kids, team pediatricians,
Right.
and figure out how we get there. But to not invite those voices to the table, you are living in an echo chamber where everybody's just agreeing, and that is not healthy for any organization. It becomes dormant and doesn't serve the needs of the people who it represents.
Yeah, change.
Big organizations, it has to happen. It becomes static.
Yep.
Yeah, change is
Just-
very difficult, and but we live in our bodies constantly change, society constantly changes.
Look, we're pediatricians. What do kids do over the life course when we see them? They change a lot.
They change from week to week when they're a month old,
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. We
so
of all people should be
change
able
is
to
constant.
change in the stage development and
Yes.
realize there's value in every single piece and step along the way.
So, what do you think is the biggest challenge for the American pediatrician today?
I think it's three things. One of which is there are a lot of competing care delivery voices that are devaluing the relationship that we're so committed to building. And so the social conversation of the value of pediatricians is devalued. We have to claim our value back, and we need
Why
to
do you
have a
think
social...
we're devalued?
Well, part of it is because we're underpaid.
Why do you think that is?
Why are we underpaid? So I think it's because kids don't vote.
That probably was the pediatrician allowed it.
Well, that's part of it.
why.
My husband likes to say we're sheep.
Yes.
We just follow each other
Yes,
around,
yes.
but I was always the black sheep, so I
Me
went
too.
over here. So I think that sometimes we're too kind at our own demise,
Right.
and we are not willing. So in many cases, the academy is a reflection of us, right? We're
Same
conflict
people.
diverse. We want to be people like us. We want to be seen as nice. Sometimes when your toddler's acting out, you can't be nice. You know better as a parent, and you need to push hard for what's the right thing to do. We need to do that professionally. We're devalued, we're underpaid, we're under-resourced, and we need to change that societal and advocacy conversation around that. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. The other is that we are all drowning under the administrative burden of a lot of crap that doesn't add any value to care.
Yes.
And that's because we've let other entities own the conversation about what matters. And as we know, our payment system in healthcare is totally broken in this country, and it's going to take brave people to push the conversation till we change it. Look, I don't know about you, but my 91-year-old mother-in-law's been in the hospital recently. It's frightening. Don't get sick right now.
Oh, yeah,
Unless
don't get
you have
sick.
someone in your family who knows how to navigate the space.
Oh my God, my father has every single chronic medical condition and a VP shunt. Do you know how many times my brother and I saved him? Literally pulled him dying, trying to die. About 10, 12 times. He has more lives than a cat. It's amazing.
No, yeah.
And
So
all we did is just point out, hey doc, I may be a pediatrician, but this does not look right to me.
So, despite all of this, next week we're going to have a very special show. And I reviewed just 2 illnesses because I think it's important the language pediatricians use. We demean ourselves.
Yep.
So, it's fascinating to read Dr. Offit's book on polio and the amount of suffering that parents and children came to from that disease. And I can't imagine what horrible summers must have been like, praying that your kid would not end up in an iron lung, dead, or paralyzed for
Yep.
the rest of his life. I can't imagine. And then I went back and reread some of the articles that I had read in the 80s about group A strep. And this is what I mean by we devalue ourselves. We don't tell people, I am finishing off cancer every day in the office. America will not see liver cancer from hepatitis B again. America won't see throat or cervical cancer because we vaccinate.
Right.
But it's not just me. It's me, and it's the parent, and it's the child that puts the muscle. And some children have died during the testing of the polio vaccines. And it's the government that gives that Medicaid, although it pays very poorly, but it does give that vaccine and access to care. And it is the private payers, and it is the office of the world who invent the vaccine. And it's, you know, the grandmothers that get on the mothers and go, take that kid and get vaccinated. It's important. It's important.
But people are poor assessors of risk.
Yes, but our language matters.
Yes, it does.
When we just say, oh, it's just a shot.
Yeah.
No, it's a vaccine.
It's a life-saving, preventing.
Correct.
We are giving your child a superpower.
Yeah.
We are
Right?
preventing them from suffering cancer. What would you do? What would you give to do that? Why do we treat strep? Which was, I had forgotten. Strep is a self-limited disease.
Yeah, except when you talk to the people and the elderly people in my family who have had rheumatoid heart disease and now need valve
That
replacements.
is it.
and-
Why?
That is it.
Right.
At the
Or
beginning of the
Sydenham's Korea or the other.
At the beginning of the 1900s, 1 out of every 4 beds in hospitals for children in America were filled with acute rheumatic heart disease
Yep.
or rheumatic fever. And the number 1 cause of death under 40 was rheumatic heart disease. We don't even think about it.
You see it in third world countries who don't have the
Yes.
same access to
The access,
to
access.
the
to
rapid
care.
strap,
Yep.
the money for the amoxicillin,
Right.
the school nurse,
Yep.
the pediatrician, the mom that drives a kid into the office, the nurse that swabs them. It's a community effort. But I'm not just writing you a script for amoxicillin. I'm preventing you from dying from heart disease. Every time I do that, I am keeping you safe from a horrible disease. But we don't say that.
Well, we say it's just, and maybe we need to make a pact, the three of us,
Yes.
that we stop ourselves every time we say it's just a cold, it's just strep throat, it's
just a shot.
It is, your child is ill with this, and we are going to help you, partner with you, so that that child can grow to adulthood and change the world. We are
Yes.
investing in the infrastructure of our society
Yes.
we are investing in your child because we know they are destined to make a difference in the world.
Yes.
And we want them around to be able to do that.
Yes, yes, that is the message.
Amen.
We,
That's a good
and I will take it a step further because I'm very much a clown. I think every pediatric office should have a wall with stars. And every time that a child completes a hepatitis B vaccination series,
Light the world, the world.
HPV vaccination series, a star goes up and that wall says, cancer's prevented in this practice.
Yeah.
And you ring that bell, just like we
That's
ring
cool.
that bell
When you finish
they
cancer
finish
treatment.
cancer treatment, because they're never going to see the walls of that hospital.
Right.
And that's how we get out of this jam. It's by telling our story, because we have a great story to tell.
Well, the stories, I'm of a generation of physician that actually saw a lot of disease, okay? I remember when I came out into private practice in '96, there was so much flu, there was so many ear infections. Remember we used to put them on prophylactic antibiotics?
Yeah.
Bioticin?
Haemophilus influenza flu, H
I
flu.
missed that. Pneumococcal disease, and we saw some H flu, but it was
I
towards the
remember
tail end of that. I missed
epiglottitis
that.
and all. I got that.
You know, and then as you started giving the Prevnar vaccine, you started giving the rotavirus vaccine, yeah, the children, they still have diarrhea, but they don't get admitted anymore. The asthmatics.
They're not
all over,
dying.
They're not dying.
Right.
We give the vaccine so the children don't get really sick.
Right.
And now, yes, they're coming in for, I heard you at the conference this morning with your compassion talk where you spoke about when the mother comes in for the runny nose, well, it's just a runny nose, why is she here? People need to hear, yes, indeed, it's just the upper respiratory infection. Thank God it's nothing more. And we will get over this.
Although
And
it's
we will be
really
fine.
funny because now patients come to me and say, they told me in the ER that I have rhinovirus.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I
It's
love
like,
that one.
okay,
Yeah,
it's
and-
still a cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
gonna be-
it has a name.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I don't understand. They'll go to the ER, they'll get that panel with 1 million viral studies. That gets
Low value and expensive.
very expensive, $1,200 to $1,300 a test. I've seen patients go to the emergency room with constipation and they had that test done.
Yeah.
And then I talked to insurance carriers about value-based
Right.
contracts, and they had the nerve to tell me, well, the expenses were high in 2020 because all these testings. I said, but it's not testing in our office. We should be doing it because we're not going to bill out $1,200.
Correct.
But they don't let you have it in the pediatric office.
Well, they do in some places, and then they ding you because you've spent too much money. So the bottom is we have to get to what is truly valuable care. And for kids, it's understanding they are the infrastructure of our society. If we do not invest in we're seeing this now, right? Infrastructure, bridges, roads crumbling across the country because it's not sexy to invest in prevention and infrastructure. The children are our infrastructure. They may be 25% of the population, they're 100% of our future. Why are we not valuing planning for our future together as a society?
We need to do a better job with it. What do you think is the biggest opportunities, for pediatric medicine?
Well, I'm always empowered and excited by young people's conversation. Even talking to teens in the office, there is I think, a trend that's a bigger conversation about the global world and how do we make changes together that are positive. There are a lot of old curmudgeons who are like, the sky is falling and everything's negative. But I think that they really care about giving back. They care about giving to others. And I don't know that I was right in my the middle part of my career when I missed a lot of birthday parties and soccer games because it was my solo practice and I wasn't there. I think that my younger colleagues are being smarter about and by means there is no work-life balance. People who keep talking about it, it is making micro decisions for this moment, which is my most priority, and then that's good enough and you just move on. It's those daily, sometimes hourly decisions. I think that I sometimes shortchanged my family for my patients, and that is always, don't make me, how do you make a choice between your own kid and somebody else's sick kid? I think our younger colleagues are having a better understanding of the implications to their own health and their family's health and well-being about putting boundaries around what is doable, what they're willing to do, and being collaborative with other people and partners to do it smarter. I think they're really smart, and we should listen to how they become agile and figure out not just doing it the way we always have.
I agree to a point.
Okay.
The practice owner with partners. I think I went to most of my kids' events. They played in bands, they did music at school, concerts. I would go as the parent that would go to a thing, but I didn't go to every single one. I think I went to 85%. I always made it work. Soccer, for example. I wanted my son to play soccer. Well, the coach would pick the day that they had practice. It was always on the day that I couldn't go. The next year, I became an assistant coach, and I became the coach, and what did I do? I picked it on my day.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's how you adapt.
Yep.
Work things.
But I also think that it's not bad for your kids to pick up resilience early on.
Right.
My sister taught kindergarten for 30 years, and she said we handed out too many smelly stickers for just showing up. Because life is a little bit challenging, and teaching them, and that's the other thing, right? Like, how do we build resilience in all of us? Our patients, our families, our colleagues, because knowing that sometimes you can't always get it 100% right, and that's okay. And I will just tell you, at this point in my life, I'm getting better at that, and I'm a planner and a perfectionist, and every day I have to make a choice about what am I prioritizing, and instead of beating myself up about the things that I didn't get done, I'm okay with what I was able to accomplish, and that's good enough, and that's okay.
80-20 rule you taught me.
Yep.
If you're good enough with 80% of the time, it's good enough.
Yep, it's good enough. You'll
I
never
learned
make it
that from
100.
you.
Thank you.
But another thing that I have trouble wrapping my head around is this physicians coming out with having a hard time getting physicians to call, because we're not on call that much anymore. But working on Saturdays or doing a late shift or, God forbid, Sunday. But it's this generation that wants that. You know what our hottest day of the week is? Saturday.
So here's what I would say, and it occurred to me as I was giving my talk. They're looking at transactional care. When they make those decisions, they're not talking about being compassionate to the patients and creating relationships. If you ask them to relook at that from the lens of compassionate for the families, we may find, and we may have to be a little bit flexible in it's more people but shorter shifts, so not your
well, that's
whole
what we do.
Saturday's not gone.
We do.
It's like
It
3
rotates.
hours of your Saturday's gone or something, right? We have to get out of our way and find a way for them to say yes.
Yes.
So I think I'm always so impressed when I talk to you, but I think what you said today, I think there's a bright future, and every child's a blank canvas. And I don't care if they're going to be mom, dad, the president, the garbage collector, the guy that brings you the coffee at the PMI
They
meeting.
still have value.
They have value, and they can do a great job of whatever their job is and be proud of that.
Be a good person, a good human,
And work
a caring
hard.
person, connect with other people.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's just whatever your job title is, you can do that.
Well, and I will say, as pediatricians, people are looking to fix little things and treat conjunctivitis and treat pneumonia and treat whatever. I think looking back at my career, I've had way more impact in establishing connections as humans to kids and their families, and make them feel seen, heard, appreciated, valued, and acknowledged for just being themselves. And I think those relationships are what will paint the way to a bright future, and for a bright future for pediatricians who are fostering that conversation and that kind of thing. But we have to get out of transactional medicine.
We do.
We are not just RVUs,
No.
The youth thing was started by hospitals.
because they're transactional.
They're transactional, and I'm seeing a lot of physicians coming over that want to leave the hospital systems to come back into private practice. And, I'm proud of people like Dr. Wanya that want to start from scratch, and she does it right. She's figuring it out.
Yes.
And you can't serve everybody.
Yeah.
So you decide where your niche is and what you're going to do, and then you build it in a way that resonates with you. And I will just tell you, she had team members who came with her. The same thing happened when I left my original practice over 15 years. They saw the picture of what I was trying to do, which was to partner with families in their health and
Yes.
wellness and care for their kids. And it makes you want to go to work. You
Yes.
get up in the morning and go, oh God, it's like the triple demic. How many?
I love going to work. I really
Good for
do.
you. Good for you.
I probably
I don't. I'm happy reading my books and preparing for the next podcast.
It's cool to go to work. I have students that come to me. You know what the sad part with the students is? I get a student every month from New York Institute of Technology. I ask them, so what do you want to do? I want to do ER, I want to do internal medicine, I want to do dermatology, I want to do radiology. I never hear pediatrics. And I tell them, listen, whether you like pediatrics or not, you're going to encounter a child somewhere in your lifetime. There's board questions. Pediatrics has a lot of board questions. Learn from me as much as you can. By the end of the month, they said, I never thought pediatrics could be. Did I change some minds in the future? Maybe I did, I don't know. But they thanked me, they examined, they worked the EHR, they performed the procedures, the COVID test, the strep test. They act like it. By the fourth week, they're acting like me. They can fake it probably for about a week or two before somebody catches on.
So how many pediatricians have you had former patients that grew up and sort of saw you and said, I want to be like that? Have you had a couple?
I have, right now, I think there's 3 that I know that are in medical school right now.
Over the course of my career, I think I have about 15.
I have not a single one that wanted to be a pediatrician. I have a very dear, actually Lisa's going to be in the podcast. She was my vice president of operations. Her son is very entrepreneurial, and every time I talk to him, he says, it's all you, Dr. Bravo. I saw you run a business 7 days a week and make it work. And have a family and spend time with me and give my mom a job, and that instilled in me my own business.
That's awesome.
That's it.
And those are the kindest word anybody can tell.
Well, that inspiration comes from the compassion, and you saw that child and you shared of yourself. That's the other thing about being compassionate. you have to share a little bit of your own humanness if you're going to make a connection. And so that wall in training where they teach you to separate, I think sometimes does us a disservice. In that you don't want to, you can't solve the world's problems, but giving a little bit, opening your heart to others, I think helps them heal, helps them feel seen and heard, and is self-reflected back on us. One of those things we talked about this morning in my lecture was, believe it or not, a different part of your brain on a functional MRI lights up when you are compassionate and you do something you want to act to help others. It is a totally different, and it's the same part of the brain as happiness and it hits your center. We have to do more about giving in order to get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful opportunity. Fantastic. You are our first live podcast, so.
I am always willing to work outside the box.
Well, this is really outside the box.
This is really outside the box, causing me a lot of stress, but it's okay.
That's all right. You rose to the challenge, George.
all the time.
I think, and hopefully we will all get to sit together again at PMI next year.
That'd be terrific. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you, and God bless you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.